When Black Sheep Squadron first came out on American TV in 1976, not many people knew that behind the show's exciting dogfights and disobedient pilots was a much darker and more difficult story. The main character of the show was a real Marine Corps ace named Gregory "Pappy" Boynton. That wasn't your average war movie. The show was about fights, loss, and the thin line between being brave and hurting yourself. At first, it was a story about pilots who didn't belong flying over the Pacific, but it quickly turned into a look at the hard lives of the guys who played and made the characters. Boynton had been through a terrible disaster in real life that could never be properly portrayed in a Hollywood movie. The real guy behind the story. Before Black Sheep Squadron became a big hit, there was a real man whose life was much harder than anything on TV. Gregory "Pappy" Boynton wasn't rich and didn't have a miraculous life story. He became famous for not being afraid and not giving up. He was born in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, on December 4th, 1912. When he was young, flying was still just a dream. Before he flew a warplane, he went to the University of Washington to learn aeronautical engineering. There, he learned how airplanes work. What he learned in school did shape him, but not fully. He was willing to risk things. Since he got to the United States, in the U.S., Boynton was seen as a man who had a hard time staying still and following the rules. Marines. When he first joined the service, he always had problems with his bosses. He sometimes crossed lines that not many people would dare to, and he didn't always do what he was told. Of course, that same rebelliousness made him a great pilot. Before the U.S., when Japan joined World War II, Boynton quit the Marines to join the Flying Tigers, an American volunteer group in China. He learned how to kill, which would later make him famous, while flying missions against Japanese planes. In those planes, he also saw battle for the first time, with all its violence and chaos. This took away the military's appeal. Boynton went back home, joined the Marine Corps again, and was put in charge of the failing VMF 214 Squadron when the U.S. officially joined the war. The pilots in the group were moved from other groups, men who were seen as unstable, not good enough, or rebellious. Boynton knew exactly the kind of people who were turned away from the service. Because he was unexpected, he turned them into what history will call the Black Sheep. The squadron had great success in battle in the Solomon Islands, Munda, and Bougainville. They quickly became one of the most feared fighting groups in the Pacific. He said he killed 28 people, which would make him one of the best American soldiers in the war. But one guy was falling apart under the winds. He drank too much, which became both his getaway and his curse. Other pilots have said in the past that Pappy was great in the air, but careless on the ground. As he flew over Rabaul on January 3, 1944, his luck finally ran out. After their plane crashed into it, Japanese troops caught him. Boynton was a prisoner of war for 20 months before he was freed. Everyone thought he was dead because he was hurt, hungry, and at home by himself. The media called him a hero when he came back in 1945. He felt more like a ghost than a person, though. His inner struggles affected his life after the war. His personal life had lost the discipline that had made his group great. Alcohol and grief watched over everything he did. Despite the fact that his health was getting worse, Boynton kept telling his story. When Baa Baa Black Sheep came out in 1958, it wasn't a story of success. This was an honest act. His memoir showed his pride, anger, and sorrow, and it also showed that there is no romance in war. It turned out to be one of the most brutally honest things a Marine pilot had ever written. Boynton wasn't a great boxer, as shown by his story. The story was about a broken man who showed real life on TV and made failure famous. In the middle of the 1970s, when NBC chose to turn Gregory "Pappy" Boynton's story into a movie, television was going through a lot of changes. People were tired of battle stories with heroes who were too good to be true, so they wanted shows where the heroes looked more like real people. Producers Stephen J. Cannell and Philip Daguerre were interested in Boynton's book Baa Baa Black Sheep because it was different from other war stories. It's not about heroes or freaks. It's about people who don't follow the rules. It wasn't easy to turn a sad book full of bad language and personal problems into a primetime TV show either. The people in charge at NBC wanted a show that had a good mix of fun, action, and heart. Cannell, who was already known for making characters who were both strong and likable, turned Boyington's world into a book set on a remote island in the South Pacific. The name Baa Baa Black Sheep was chosen to make people think of the squadron's nickname and its ability to deal with being different. Boyington's wartime experiences influenced writers, even though they softened the harsh truths. His strange personality traits, like mood swings, mental scars, and drinking, were turned into those of a likable bad guy. Instead of thinking about broken soldiers coming back from Vietnam, families wanted to see a hero on the network. Finding the right people turned out to be the hardest part. They were looking for someone tough, interesting, and dependable. A man who could get attention without yelling. The best actor for the part was Robert Conrad, who was best known for his role in the Wild Wild West. But the fact that he didn't seem to be playing scared the people in charge. He was known for fighting in bars, and this often showed in his work. Cannell says that Conrad's hiring was risky and could have made or broken the project as a whole. Conrad and Boyington felt like they had a strange link. The officials didn't understand either man because he was cocky and stubborn. Even though Black Sheep Squadron was cute, it often crossed the line between reality and fantasy. Most of the pilots, like the ones with Bob Anderson and Jerry Bragg, were made just for TV, and the island of Vella La Vella was changed into the made-up island of Vella Lava. The loud group of pranksters on TV was nothing like the VMF 214 Squadron in real life. In later interviews, Boyington said that his troops were mostly just trying to make it through each day. Since then, historians have said that the show opened the Pacific War. Many times, Japanese planes were shown in video games as targets instead of real enemies. Boyington was also shown to be charming. On the TV show, he was shown as a boss who was both rebellious and kind, but in real life, he was a man who couldn't decide how to treat his workers. They both respected and avoided him. Boyington, who played General Harrison Ken Lay in 3 episodes, wasn't afraid to say bad things about the version. It was Hollywood hokum, he said. He said, winning wasn't the real story of VMF 214. They got the name right, but not the truth. It was about people who were broken but went on to make history anyway. Still, the play brought his memory to the attention of new people. Many people in the United States didn't know about the Black Sheep Squadron. Veterans told NBC that the show made them think of their own heroes who had died, while kids hung toy Corsairs from their roofs. Even though the show had problems in the past, it was memorable. Trouble behind the scenes. What happened behind the cameras was just as crazy as what happened on screen. The producers of the show had to work with tight shooting schedules and constant money problems. The group got rid of the old T-6 Texan training planes that were used in the 1970 movie Tora, so that they looked like Japanese Zero fighters. Tor. People with sharp eyes could tell the difference. The method worked even though the wings and motors didn't match. Robert Conrad ran the set like a Marine base. Members of the cast remembered how strict he was. He showed up early, practiced hard, and wouldn't put up with laziness. Some people were moved by it. Some people were worn out. Dirk Blocker, who played Jerry Bragg, said that Conrad was more than just a boss. On the other hand, bad things were coming. Sergeant Andy Micklin was played by Red West as a close friend and bodyguard of Elvis Presley. West was making an episode of Black Sheep Squadron on August 16, 1977, when Elvis died. Because he was so sad, he took the day off to cry. His death cast a shade over the set. Then there was Meatball, the bull terrier. He didn't fit in on the show, but he became a fan favorite. Not many people knew that the character had 2 dogs, one for the funny parts and one for the sad ones. The trick dog Bounty was later taken in by a crew member after being kicked off the show. Short autobiographies like these gave a show that was always having trouble with time and fans a human touch. The man, the actor, and the legacy. Black Sheep Squadron was still an important part of Robert Conrad's life after the show finished. In the 1980s and 1990s, he kept acting, but the part of Pappy Boyington kept coming back to haunt him. Conrad had a wild side to him, just like the real Boyington. He was always trying to prove how valuable he was. In the 1988 movie High Mountain Rangers, which starred him, his daughter Joan, and his sons Shane and Christian were also in it. But in the 2000s, his once iron body started to give out on him. His last movie role was in Dead Above Ground, which came out in 2002. Gregory Boyington lived long enough to see other people become famous across the country. He died in 1988 at the age of 75 and was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. He died of heart failure in 2020 when he was 84 years old. He had 8 children and 18 grandkids. Even though they lived in different places, their lives were alike. There are 2 brave, strong guys who really feel bad about what they did. But the real VMF, 214 Squadron, kept going. After World War II, they fought in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, using all kinds of planes, from the F-4U Corsair to the F-35B Lightning II fighters that are based in Yuma, Arizona today. They began as a small group of black sheep and grew into one of the most powerful American groups. Marines from the United States. The unfinished flight. Fans of Black Sheep Squadron often talk about a strange mix of memories and sadness when they watch the show again. Even though the show stopped airing on network TV in 1978, its memory lives on like the sound of an engine far away disappearing into the clouds. Anyone who watched Gregory Pappy Boyington and his team of strange pilots as a child knew it wasn't just another war movie. It was a story about flaws, making amends, and how weak family can be when they are under pressure. There was more to it than just jokes, planes, and fights. The men who were heard in those cockpits were what made the show go. People who were less heroic and more human learned to fight not only the enemy, but also their own inner fears. That mood was caught by Boyington in his writing long before it became a TV show. A quote he made about his life stuck with people. "We weren't heroes. We were just survivors of terrible choices." This quote became the show's moral compass. Conflict was not shown in a good way on the show. It admitted that it was stupid. It was hard to believe that every snarky remark, fight between pilots, and failed mission was based on real events. They were afraid that if they didn't laugh, their fear would make them fall down. With its dark humor and strong male figures, the show stood out from the clean heroes that were popular in entertainment after World War II. All of Black Sheep Squadron's artistic freedom gave us a clear, unfiltered look at how memories can change the course of events. The real VMF 214 group kept working with different types of planes, from F-35B stealth fighters to Corsair propeller planes, long after the cameras stopped running. Men who used to wear leather coats and joke about being black sheep became the face of what it meant to be an American. But the TV version became the myth that people would always remember them by, while their real-life events became less important. There was a mix of feeling, fantasy, and the real world. Reruns and retrospectives on military networks still make people think of the show decades later. People who were younger saw it as a time capsule of 1970s TV, when real feeling and tight budgets lived together and history wasn't shown as a war story, but with bravery and ambiguity. Heroes who inspire people are shown to not have to be perfect. Some people are naturally stubborn, stupid, and need to stay alive. When Robert Conrad died in 2020, one of the last live links between Hollywood and Boyington's mystery was cut off. But there will always be a link between the legacies of these 2 guys. In their own ways, both of them were stubborn and wouldn't follow the rules. Even though there were some problems with how they worked together, they made something that will last forever. A story about what it's like to be human when things don't go as planned. People can still hear the black sheep spirit when an old soldier salutes at a memorial or when a Corsair roars during an air show. To last, a legacy only needs memories. It doesn't need awards or memorials. It's an honor to honor flawed heroes who tried to fly against the wind with Black Sheep Squadron's unfinished but never-ending flight. For all the fans who keep humming the theme song, this is for you. A legacy that lasts. Both the TV show and the real-life squadron had a big effect on popular culture in the United States. Even after Black Sheep Squadron stopped in 1978, people could watch more than just an action-packed story on the show. What it meant to be human was looked at, and the lives of flawed men who found meaning in their bravery, defiance, and difficulties were shown. The show showed what it's like to be a part of something bigger than yourself, a connection made when there was strife. Not only did the play entertain people, It also helped keep the Black Sheep legend alive, which made Boyington and his company famous. A lot of veterans saw a lot of themselves in the guys of VMF 214. A whole generation of Americans who had grown up during the Vietnam War and were sick of seeing their heroes portrayed in stereotypical ways could connect to the rebellious spirit, sense of community, and sense of humor in the face of pain. It's amazing how Black Sheep Squadron went from being a military drama to a story about outsiders who learn to deal with problems and keep going. Gregory "Pappy" Boyington was a hero in his own right. He fought for what he believed in, went through unbearable hardships, and lived to tell the tale even though everything was trying to break him. Not because he was perfect. Boyington wasn't always portrayed well on the show, but those flaws showed something important about what it means to be a hero. A lot of people who liked Black Sheep Squadron never really stopped liking the group. The show went beyond the usual well-liked war stories to show how strong people are and how complicated warfare can be. In the 1980s and 1990s, when it was shown again, it got new viewers who liked it for reasons other than the excitement. They were also interested in the show's greater themes of friendship, loss, and surviving. Veterans also found comfort in the show. They often said it made them think of the guys they served with, many of whom are long forgotten. Lessons learned from Black Sheep Squadron. The real VMF 214 Squadron continued to serve with honor years after the show ended, changing with the times and flying through new generations. People who were after them, from Korea to Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, had the Black Sheep mentality. The guys with the same name kept the squadron's history alive. They were still brave and determined, just like Boyington's first company, but they were also able to adapt to new situations and technologies. Black Sheep Squadron is a piece of TV history from the 1970s. It takes us back to a time when people were okay with having a different view of heroes. Also, it's a living memorial to the men of VMF 214, who were brave in war but flawed in real life. They represent both the weakness and the strength of the human spirit. Hollywood may have made Boyington and his crew look less scary than they really were, but the show had an effect. It told the story of the Black Sheep and made it more well-known than history could have. In the minds of people who lived through the Vietnam War or the 1960s, Black Sheep Squadron was more than just a fun show. It took them back to a time when heroes were known not by their medals, but by their unwavering will to fly, no matter how many fights they had been in or how many wounds they got. Thoughts on the legacy? The Black Sheep Squadron is still loved, and not just because it has a special place in people's hearts. Many people also know it for how well it shows Gregory "Pappy" Boyington and his men. Some big changes were made to the events of the TV show, but the main point of the story was still told. They were stars because real guys had flaws, like Black Sheep. Like real-life heroes, the show is still unfinished to honor the flawed and broken heroes who continue to inspire people decades after the last episode played. Even though it's not on during prime time anymore, the show still has an effect because it reminds people of the complicated and bittersweet reality of war and the people who fight it. Black Sheep Squadron keeps flying for all the fans who still remember the theme song and for all the soldiers who saw their own struggles on TV. Some of its effects are still felt today, but they will last forever, just like the men it honors.